In this lecture, we'll dive into the AI tools within Parabola. We'll focus on the extraction feature of AI in Parabola to tidy up the sources in the data that we got from our API call. Right now, it's not as visually appealing as it could be, but the AI extraction feature will help us fix that. So to start, what you'll want to do is click into the search box and search for extract with AI, and once you've found it, you'll then want to drag it out onto the canvas and add it next to the previous function, and you'll want to make sure that they are connected with the arrow joining them. Otherwise, if it's not, the data won't flow from the previous function to the next. But after adding your function and have it connected, you'll then want to open the settings so we can begin setting it up. Now, if this is your first time using the AI functions in Parabola, you will likely get a notice like this appear on the left-hand side, but we can simply press I understand and proceed, so we can start building out what we want to. But one thing to note here is that even though Parabola's AI functions process data using GPT from OpenAI, we're going to work with it in a different way. And by that I mean, there will be no need for us to input our own API keys from OpenAI. Parabola lets us access the AI functions through their implementation, so that's pretty cool. Now, before we start defining everything here, what I want to do is switch tabs along the top. So to input one, pull from API, which gets the data so we can see it from the previous function that we created in the previous lecture. So this is the data that we're going to be working with in this lecture, and specifically we're going to be focusing on this source column, so the first column. Now, as it stands, the data inside is in a dictionary, which isn't what we want. We're after just the name of the source or publisher. In this case, it's TechCrunch, and like I mentioned, there's only one item for yesterday related to this ticker symbol. But whether there's 10, 100, or even 1 in this case, everything works exactly the same. So let's begin defining an AI call using Parabola. So the first thing that we'll want to do is edit for each row evaluate. So by opening it and clicking these columns, what I want to do is click add and then select the source column only, because we don't want to work with the other columns and run this AI call using them. So once you've added the source column, you can click off the menu bar. And then below that, where it says and extract text into these new columns, what we can do here is add the name of the new column that we want to create. And this column will hold the output that we're looking for. So I'm going to name it publication, something super simple and very clear. Now comes the exciting part. So let's expand the fine-tuning option. This is where we can give the AI specific instructions to follow. And this context is crucial for the task that we want it to complete. Let me now paste in my instruction, and then I'm going to explain it for you. So I'm going to enter extract the source name for each row. For example, ID, TechCrunch, name, TechCrunch should become only TechCrunch. Now, you'll notice that I wrote extract the source name for each row. I'm assuming that there is going to be more than one. Of course, in this example, there is only one row, but it doesn't matter about the prompt. We can leave that as is. And if you do have multiple rows, then this will be very helpful. And then we go into and give it some context. So we have, for example, ID, TechCrunch, name, TechCrunch. And this replicates what we see here in the source column, where we have the ID and then the name of the ID, the name, and then the name of the name, which is TechCrunch. And going further, we tell it what it should become. So we don't want it inside a dictionary. We just want the name of the source. And in this case, that's TechCrunch. Now keep in mind that the ID and the name that you mention here will vary depending on the sources. So use one example of a source from your data. Ideally the first one. It might be, for example, BBC, so use that. But in my case, as we can see, it's TechCrunch, so I've used that. Now just to reiterate, let me explain the instruction again that I created for those of you who are unsure why I did it the way I did. So in the prompt, we start by stating the specific task that we want the AI to complete. That is extracting the source name for each row of data. The input here is the rows of source data we have from our API call, as well as the example we provide, which comes from the first row of data. And like I just said, remember not to copy my source. Depending on when you watch this lecture, you might have a different source in your first row, so update it accordingly. I'm moving on with my explanation in regards to how prompts are structured. Next, in theory, we would have output, and that isn't explicitly defined in this prompt. The output, of course, is for the AI to add items to the new column that we titled Publication. But like I said, we did not explicitly define it in fine-tuning, which is fine for the way it works in Parabola. And the final element of the prompt, which is context, is provided with the example that we provide from the first row, and that's crucial. So I've written what the data currently looks like, and then what it should look like. And then with this context, the model knows exactly what I want the data to be presented like. So there, I've covered the 4 elements of a prompt in fine-tuning. Now, if you skipped the prompt engineering section, I suggest you go back and review it, as it offers valuable insights into the elements of a prompt and more. Now, once you've done everything that I've done, what you can then do is click Show Updated Results to launch and run the function. And depending on the amount of data that you have to process, it might take a few moments. But once the process has completed, what you'll then see is a new column with the correct data at the end of the table. So we can see here we have our publication column, and then we have the source name exactly as we wanted it, directly taken from the source column. So that's fantastic, and it's working as intended. And just like that, we've used AI in Parabola to extract data quickly and efficiently. This function is really useful if you have lots of similar data types that you want to manipulate. It can serve as an alternative to regex, which has a steeper learning curve. Now, before wrapping up on this lecture, I want to point out the quotes that I added, which you can see here. I've highlighted it in the fine-tuning box. You'll notice I use 3 quotes before and after each element. I did this because the OpenAI documentation suggests that it's helpful. Of course, we don't know exactly how helpful it is, but since it's mentioned in the documentation, we're following their recommendations for refining prompts. But that's it for this lecture on setting up AI extraction functions. We can now click off this module and go back to our canvas. Join me in the next lecture where we'll explore the AI categorization function.